Mark, please forgive me.
You made your choice. Now live with it.
The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days when my wife Jessica told me she wanted a divorce. We were sitting at Bella Vista, her favorite restaurant in Manhattan, the place where the waiters knew her by name and always kept her preferred window table available. I wasn't eating. My plate sat untouched in front of me, the food growing cold while I watched her, really watched her, maybe for the first time in months. The way she laughed too loudly at something her friend Daniel said over the phone, the way she didn't even glance at me when she finally hung up, the way her diamond earrings caught the candlelight, earrings I'd given her for our 5th anniversary, back when I still believed we were building something together that would last. "You're not eating," she said, finally noticing me. Her voice had that edge to it, the one that always appeared when I wasn't performing my role correctly, when I wasn't being the perfect accessory she needed me to be. "Are you trying to make some kind of statement, Mark?" I wasn't. I was just tired, exhausted, really. Tired of being the husband she paraded around at charity galas while whispering to her friends that I was decent enough considering. Tired of living in her penthouse, sleeping in her bed, wearing clothes purchased with her family's money. Tired of being reminded in 1,000 subtle and not so subtle ways that I was a guest in her life, not a partner, never an equal. "I'm fine," I said quietly, "just not hungry." She rolled her eyes, actually rolled them like a teenager annoyed with a parent, and went back to her steak. The waiter appeared, asking if everything was satisfactory, and Jessica launched into this detailed critique of the wine pairing, using words I'd learned meant absolutely nothing, except that she enjoyed making service workers scramble to please her. That's when I knew, sitting there in that overpriced restaurant, watching my wife of 8 years treat a stranger with more attention than she'd given me in months, I knew our marriage was over, had been over probably for longer than I wanted to admit. The question wasn't whether we'd end, it was when, and how much of myself I'd lose in the process. I didn't have to wait long for the answer. We didn't speak in the car ride home. Jessica scrolled through Instagram, double-tapping photos of people I'd never met, people from her world, the world of trust funds and summer homes in the Hamptons, of prep schools and country clubs where memberships cost more than most people earned in a year. I'd never quite fit into that world, despite 8 years of trying, 8 years of slowly erasing myself to become whoever she needed me to be. My mother used to tell me that love didn't care about bank accounts. She'd say it while we sat in our small apartment in Brooklyn, her working double shifts as a nurse, while I studied for the scholarship exams that would eventually get me into a decent college. She'd say it while we ate pasta for the 4th night in a row because that's what we could afford. She'd say it with such conviction that I believed her completely. She was wrong. Or maybe she was right, and what Jessica and I had was never love at all. Maybe it was just convenience, just proximity, just two people who looked good together on paper, even if the reality was hollow. The penthouse was dark when we arrived. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Manhattan, the kind of view that makes tourists press their faces against glass barriers and dream. I used to stand at those windows and feel like I'd made it, like the kid from Brooklyn had somehow cracked the code, married the princess, entered the castle. Now I just felt like an imposter waiting to be found out, waiting for someone to realize I didn't belong. "We need to talk," Jessica said, kicking off her heels and walking to the bar. She poured herself a scotch, Macallan 25, because of course, without offering me one. Not that I wanted it. "This isn't working. You know it isn't working." I did know, but hearing her say it out loud made something crack open in my chest, something I'd been keeping carefully sealed for months, maybe years. "What do you want, Jessica?" She turned then, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, clinical assessment. Like she was evaluating a bad investment, deciding whether to cut her losses. A divorce, a clean one, quick, no drama. The word hung in the air between us. Divorce. The end of everything we'd built, or everything I'd thought we were building, while she'd apparently been planning her exit strategy. "Okay," I said, because what else was there to say? Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She'd expected a fight, maybe tears, begging. But I'd learned something in 8 years of marriage to Jessica Whitmore. She always got what she wanted. Fighting only prolonged the inevitable and gave her ammunition to use against you later. "Okay," she repeated. "That's it. What do you want me to say? That I'll fight for a marriage you clearly checked out of months ago? That'll make this difficult? I won't. If you want a divorce, we'll get a divorce. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment that I wasn't giving her the scene she'd rehearsed for. Then it was gone, replaced by that same cool efficiency I'd learned to recognize as her default setting. Good. My lawyer will send over the papers tomorrow. You can have Harold look them over. Oh, wait. She smiled, and it was not a kind smile. You can't afford Harold, can you? Well, I'm sure there are plenty of adequate attorneys who work for less. There it was. The knife slipped between the ribs so smoothly I almost didn't feel it at first. The reminder of exactly where I stood in her hierarchy of importance. I'll find someone, I managed. She took a sip of her scotch, studying me over the rim of the glass like I was something interesting she'd found under a microscope. You should probably start packing. I'd like you out by the end of the week. The penthouse is in my name, obviously, as is, well, everything, really. My throat tightened. Everything. Did you contribute to the down payment, Mark? The mortgage? The renovations? Do you pay the maintenance fees? Each question was delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut deep. No, so yes, everything. I'd known this, of course. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I'd always known that nothing in this life was actually mine. But knowing it theoretically and having it laid out in such stark terms were completely different things. I have some savings, I started. Do you? Her smile widened, and I felt my stomach drop. That joint account we opened when we got married? I closed it this afternoon, transferred everything to my personal account. My lawyer says it's perfectly legal. It was my money funding it anyway. You're welcome to whatever's in your old checking account from before we met. I'm sure those... She paused, pretending to calculate. $600 will take you far. The room tilted slightly. $600. That's what 8 years of marriage had left me with. $600 in a closet full of designer clothes I'd never wanted, paid for with money that was never mine. Jessica, oh, and Mark. She set down her glass and walked toward the bedroom, pausing in the doorway. I'd appreciate it if you were gone by Monday morning. I have someone coming over for brunch, and it would be awkward if you were still here. Someone, not even a name, just someone. Someone who was probably already sleeping in our bed on the nights I worked late. Someone she'd been planning this escape with while I'd been naive enough to think we were just going through a rough patch. The bedroom door closed with a soft click. I stood there in the living room for a long time, staring at those windows I'd once loved, at the city spread out below like a glittering promise. From up here, New York looked beautiful, magical, like anything was possible. From where I was standing, it just looked cold and indifferent. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Instead, I pulled out my old duffel bag, the one from college, worn and patched, shoved in the back of the closet behind garment bags of suits I'd never paid for, and started packing. It was amazing how little was actually mine. The clothes, hers. The watch, a gift from her parents. The laptop, purchased with her credit card. I found myself sorting through 8 years of my life and realizing I could fit what was truly mine into a single bag. Some old books, a few photos of my mother, the Columbia hoodie I'd worn so much in grad school that the letters were cracking, my phone, which I'd insisted on paying for myself, one of the few small rebellions I'd maintained. And there, at the bottom of my drawer, buried under socks I'd never worn, was my mother's card. I'd forgotten about it, honestly. She'd given it to me a week before she died, pressed it into my hand while she lay in that hospital bed, the cancer having eaten away everything except her determination to see me settled, cared for, safe. Promise me you'll keep this, she'd whispered, her voice thin as paper, barely audible above the machines keeping her alive. Don't use it unless you absolutely have to, but keep it. Promise me, Mark. I'd promised, even though I didn't understand why. It was just an old bank card, worn smooth at the edges, the numbers barely visible. She'd never had much money. Nurses don't get rich, and a single mother raising a kid in New York even less so. I'd assumed whatever account it connected to held maybe a few $100s, if that. A small emergency fund she'd somehow kept hidden from her own dire emergencies. Now, sitting on the floor of a penthouse I was being evicted from, I turned the card over in my hands. The plastic was warm from being buried in the drawer. The bank's logo was faded almost to nothing. Chase. I could just barely make out an account number. My mother's name embossed in raised letters. Margaret Sullivan. I slipped the card into my wallet, though I wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe, or sentimentality, or the desperate hope that my mother had somehow left me something that could help me survive the next few days until I figured out what came next. The sun was rising by the time I finished packing. Gray light filtered through those expensive windows, washing everything in shades of nothing. I could hear Jessica in the bedroom, her alarm going off, the sound of her morning routine beginning. Shower, skincare, the ritual of constructing the perfect Jessica Whitmore that the world would see. I left before she came out. Didn't say goodbye. What was there to say? The streets were still wet from the rain, but it had finally stopped. I walked for hours, my duffel bag over my shoulder, my phone dying slowly in my pocket because I hadn't thought to grab my charger, and it had probably been purchased with her money anyway. I'd called my friend Ryan from grad school, and he'd said I could crash on his couch for a few days. Not long, he'd warned. His girlfriend Emily was already annoyed about how small their apartment was. But a few days. Enough time to figure out next steps. Except there weren't many steps to figure out. I'd been working at Jessica's family's investment firm, a cushy position I'd gotten not through merit but through marriage. That would end with the divorce, obviously. I had no real savings. $600 might cover a week in a terrible motel if I was lucky. My credit cards were all connected to accounts she'd controlled. I didn't have a car. We'd sold mine years ago because it's ridiculous to have two cars in Manhattan, Mark, and mine is nicer anyway. I'd willingly dismantled my own independence, piece by piece, thinking I was building a partnership, thinking love meant merging everything, sharing everything, becoming a unit instead of two separate people. I'd been an idiot. By noon, I found myself standing outside a Chase Bank branch in Midtown. I don't know what made me walk in. Desperation, maybe. Or the vague thought that I should at least see if my mother's account had anything in it before I started pawning what little I owned. The branch was nearly empty. Just a few people at the ATMs and a banker sitting at one of the desks, scrolling through his phone with the look of someone bored beyond measure on a Saturday morning. I approached the ATM first, slid in my mother's card, waited for it to be rejected, to tell me the account was closed, expired, invalid. Instead, it asked for a PIN. I stood there staring at the screen, trying to remember. Had my mother ever told me? I entered her birthday. Invalid. My birthday. Invalid. One more try before the card would be locked. On impulse, I entered the date she'd given me the card, the day before she died. The screen changed. Account accepted. Would you like to check your balance? My hand trembled slightly as I pressed yes. The machine thought for a moment, processing, and then, error. Please see a banker for assistance. Of course, the account probably had $12 in it, and the ATM couldn't even process something that pathetically small. I pulled out the card and walked to the desk, where the bored banker looked up with the expression of someone about to deliver bad news he'd delivered 1,000 times before. Can I help you? Yeah, I have this card for my mother. She passed away 7 years ago, and I'm just trying to see if there's anything in the account. I slid it across the desk, feeling like I was begging. Maybe I was. He picked it up, glanced at it, started to insert it into his computer with that same bored expression, and then his face changed. It was subtle at first, just a slight widening of the eyes, a pause in his movements. But then he looked at the screen, looked at the card, looked at me, and the blood literally drained from his face. All the color just went out of it. Sir, he said, his voice suddenly very different, very careful. Can you wait here for just one moment? Is something wrong? No, not wrong, just please wait here. He stood up so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. And then he was walking, almost running to the back offices, the card still in his hand. I watched him go, confused, a sick feeling building in my stomach. Had my mother done something illegal? Was this some kind of fraud? Was I about to be arrested for trying to access a dead woman's account? Minutes passed. Long, uncomfortable minutes. Other bankers started glancing my way, whispering to each other. A woman in a suit came out of the back office, looked at me, said something sharp to the first banker I couldn't hear. And then they were both walking toward me, and the man's face was still pale, and the woman was carrying a folder. Mr. Sullivan, she said, and her voice was gentle in the way people's voices get when they're about to change your life completely. I'm Rebecca Klein, the branch manager. Could you come with me, please? Somewhere more private? The sick feeling intensified. What's going on? Sir, the first banker said, and his voice was shaking slightly. Please, you need to see this. They led me to a private office in the back, closing the door behind us. The manager sat down across from me, opened the folder, and pulled out a statement. Mr. Sullivan, I need to verify your identity first. Can I see your driver's license? I handed it over with shaking hands. She studied it, compared it to something on her computer screen, nodded slowly. It's you. You're really you. What are you talking about? She slid the statement across the desk. I looked down at it, at the account number that matched my mother's card, at the name, Margaret Sullivan, primary account holder, David Sullivan. Wait, no. Mark Sullivan, beneficiary upon death. And then I saw the balance. I stopped breathing. I had to be reading it wrong. Had to be. That many zeros didn't exist in my mother's world. Couldn't exist. It was impossible. I couldn't even finish the sentence. $247 million, the manager said softly. Give or take a few $100,000. The account has been accruing interest for 7 years. Your mother set it up as a trust that would transfer to you automatically upon her death, but only if you used the card she gave you. Until you did, it remained dormant, untouched. $247 million. My mother, Margaret Sullivan, who'd worked double shifts and worried about grocery bills and died in a hospital bed wearing a nightgown I'd bought at Target because it was all I could afford. $247 million. There must be a mistake, I whispered, but Rebecca Klein was shaking her head, pulling out more papers, more documents I couldn't focus on because the number kept swimming in my vision. No mistake, Mr. Sullivan, though I imagine you have questions about where this came from. She pulled out an envelope sealed, my name written on it in my mother's careful handwriting. Your mother left you something else. She instructed that this be given to you when you accessed the account. Along with this, she slid across a business card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, a law firm in London I'd never heard of. They've been managing your mother's estate, well, your estate now. There are significant holdings beyond this account, properties, investments, a trust that's been growing for decades. They'll need to speak with you immediately to begin the transfer process. She paused, studying my face. Mr. Sullivan, I know this is shocking, but sir, whoever you thought your mother was, whoever you thought you were, everything just changed. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, at my mother's handwriting, at the card with the London law firm's information, and I thought about Jessica and her penthouse, celebrating my departure with someone whose name she couldn't even be bothered to mention. Everything just changed. I sat in that office for 20 minutes before I could move. The envelope felt impossibly heavy in my hands. Just paper, just ink, but weighted with 7 years of questions I hadn't known to ask. Around me, the bank hummed with its usual Saturday rhythm, ATMs beeping, people shuffling papers, the soft murmur of transactions that meant everything and nothing to the people conducting them. But in this small room, with its generic corporate art and its desk, that had probably witnessed 1,000 financial revelations, my entire reality was fragmenting like a mirror struck dead center. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The letter inside was written on the same cheap notepad paper Mom had always used, the kind you buy in bulk from the dollar store. Even now, even revealing whatever she was about to reveal, she'd stayed true to character. My mother, who'd apparently been sitting on a fortune, had written this final confession on paper that cost pennies. The handwriting was shaky. She'd been so sick by then, could barely hold a pen, but still recognizable. Still hers. My dearest Mark, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. It means you've finally used the card I gave you, which means you've hit rock bottom or close enough that you've remembered your mother's last gift. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I'm sorry for so many things. She explained that she'd lied to me my entire life. Not about loving me, never about that, but about everything else, about who she was, about who my father was, about why we lived the way we lived when we never had to. Your father wasn't Thomas Sullivan, the accountant who abandoned us when you were 2. That man existed, yes, and he did leave. But he wasn't your father. I let you believe it, because it was easier than the truth, because the truth would have destroyed the childhood I wanted to give you. A normal childhood, one where you weren't defined by money or legacy or the weight of a name that would have consumed you. My father was Richard Chen, not Sullivan, Chen by blood. A distant cousin Mom had met at a family reunion when she was 23. He was 15 years older, already wealthy beyond imagination, already married to a woman his parents had chosen for him, already trapped in a life he never wanted. They fell in love anyway. It was stupid and reckless and wrong, Mom wrote, and it was the most real thing she'd ever felt. When she got pregnant with me, Richard wanted to leave his wife, was ready to burn it all down, but Mom wouldn't let him. I'd seen what that life did to people, she wrote. The money, the power, the way it twisted everything it touched, made people into symbols instead of human beings. I didn't want that for you. I didn't want you raised in that world, suffocated by expectations and duty and the constant weight of wealth you'd never asked for. So I left, took the name Sullivan from a man who'd briefly meant something to me, created a fiction about abandonment, and raised you as if we were poor, as if we were struggling, as if we were normal. But Richard made her promise, made her swear, that she would keep the money safe for me, that when I was old enough, strong enough, when I'd become whoever I was going to become without the wealth defining me, I'd have access to everything. Richard died when I was 7. Heart attack. Mom went to his funeral and stood in the back, anonymous, watching his legitimate family grieve. His wife never knew about us. His other children, my half-siblings, never knew about me. His company went to them, his public legacy, all the things he'd built in the world that mattered to people who measure worth in headlines and stock prices. But his personal fortune, the wealth he'd accumulated separately, the investments and properties and accounts he'd kept private, all of that he left to me through trusts and holding companies and legal structures so complex it would take a team of lawyers to untangle them. All of it waiting for the day I'd need it. I wanted you to need it, Mark, Mom wrote. I wanted you to live a real life first, to struggle and fail and succeed on your own merit, to know what it feels like to earn something, to build something, to be someone without money making every door fly open before you even knocked. Because now, when you have everything, you'll know what nothing feels like. And that knowledge, that memory of struggle, that's worth more than any amount of money I could have given you. She apologized for lying, for all the nights we ate pasta when she could have bought the entire building we lived in. But I'm not sorry for raising you the way I did. I'm not sorry for teaching you the value of $1, the dignity of work. Those lessons will serve you better than any trust fund. Then came the part that destroyed me. You're going to be angry with me. That's okay. Be angry. Rage at me if you need to. I'm dead. I can take it. But then, when the anger fades, I need you to do something for me. Be good. Be careful. Be smart. And be happy. God, please be happy. This money is your inheritance. Yes, but it's also your revenge. Revenge against every person who ever underestimated you, whoever treated you as less than, whoever made you feel small. Not revenge through destruction. That's too easy, too crude. Revenge through success, through thriving, through building a life so magnificent that everyone who doubted you has to witness it. The letter ended with a postscript that made me cry right there in that banker's office. I saw the woman you married. I died before the wedding, but I saw her picture, heard you talk about her. She's beautiful, poised, elegant, everything the world tells us we should want. But she doesn't love you the way you deserve to be loved. I could tell even then. Could hear it in your voice when you talked about her. A note of uncertainty, of trying to convince yourself. If I'm right, if she's hurt you the way I suspect she will, don't let her take anything that matters. Not your dignity, not your kindness, not your belief that real love exists. It does exist, baby. It's just rare, and it never, ever uses money as a weapon. Mom had known. Had seen through Jessica from hundreds of miles away, from a hospital bed, with nothing but my tone of voice to guide her. Rebecca gave me privacy to process everything. When I finally emerged, she explained that I needed to call London immediately. There were time-sensitive matters, properties requiring management decisions, investments needing authorization, legal structures waiting for me to claim them. I left the bank in a daze and went to Ryan's apartment. His place was tiny, 5th-floor walk-up in Hell's Kitchen. He and Emily were trying so hard to be supportive, while clearly stressed about the space. Sarah gave me until Thursday when her cousin was arriving. I couldn't tell them. Not yet. Rebecca's warning echoed in my head. Let people show you who they really are without the variable of wealth confusing things. So I lied. Told Ryan the consulting interview went well. that I might need to stay elsewhere for work, built walls between who I was and who everyone thought I'd always been. Sunday, I called London. Alexander Whitmore answered. British, cultured, professional. Mr. Sullivan, we've been waiting for you. He arranged everything. First-class flight Monday morning, hotel at the Connaught. Full briefing on my holdings. He mentioned one more thing. There was a property in New York, Tribeca, a penthouse. My mother had bought it years ago, designed it, furnished it, for me, for when I needed it. I went there Sunday afternoon. The building manager, Patricia, was expecting me. Your mother designed it, she said softly, years ago. She said it should feel like you, who you really were, not who you might pretend to be. The apartment took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson, exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, furniture that looked comfortable instead of just expensive, bookshelves full of books I'd mentioned, loving in passing conversations with Mom years ago, a coffee maker, my preferred brand, the same cheap shampoo I'd used in college. In the bedroom on the nightstand was a framed photo I'd never seen before, my mother and a man I didn't recognize. Younger versions of themselves laughing at something beyond the camera's view, standing in front of what looked like a Chinese restaurant. His arm around her shoulders, her hand on his chest. Richard Chen, my father, the man I'd never met. He had my eyes, or I had his. My mother's smile in that photo was different than any smile I'd seen in person. Unguarded, genuine, lit from within by something that had nothing to do with putting on a brave face for her son. This was what she'd given up. This happiness, this love, this man who'd made her laugh like that, for me, to give me a normal childhood, to protect me from the burden of wealth, to let me become whoever I was going to become without the weight of dynasty crushing me. Monday morning, 5:15 a.m., I stood at those windows watching the city wake up. The car service arrived at 5:30, British Airways first class to London. I'd never flown anything but economy. At JFK, the first-class check-in had no line. The agent looked at her screen and her entire demeanor changed. Mr. Sullivan, welcome. You're all set. We've upgraded you to our new first-class suite at no additional charge. The lounge was exactly what you'd expect. Leather chairs, abundant power outlets, a breakfast spread that could have fed a small village. I loaded a plate and found a corner seat, then pulled out the briefing documents the London firm had sent. The numbers were staggering. Total estimated value, over $1 billion. Not just the $247 million in liquid assets. Properties worth $340 million, corporate holdings worth $520 million. Art and collectibles worth $93 million. Real estate in London, New York, Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, Cape Town, Sao Paulo, Dubai. The Tribeca penthouse alone was worth $38 million. 6 board positions at major corporations, each paying $2 to $3 million annually just for attending meetings. Jessica's entire trust fund was $8 million. Her whole family's combined wealth was $68 million. I had more than 10 times that. The flight was called. I boarded through a separate entrance, away from the crowds, into a cabin that bore no resemblance to any airplane I'd ever been on. Private pods with doors that closed, seats that transformed into fully flat beds, personal wardrobes for hanging clothes. And then, at 8:17, I heard her voice. Yes, the suite is fine. No, I don't need champagne. Jessica, 3 rows ahead. Of course she was on my flight to London. The universe apparently has a very specific sense of humor about these things. I closed my suite door completely. Spent 7.5 hours hiding from the woman who thought she'd seen the last of me, reading through corporate board meeting minutes and financial reports, learning about the empire my father had built and my mother had protected. At Heathrow, 2 lawyers from Whitmore and Associates met me, James Crawford and Rachel Okonkwo. Professional, sharp, clearly prepared. They had a car waiting, a Mercedes. During the drive to central London, they briefed me on everything. My father had been a financial genius. Technology investments in the late 80s before the boom, real estate, venture capital, emerging markets before they emerged. Your mother made sure none of it was evil, Rachel explained with a smile. She rejected private prisons, predatory lending, fossil fuel extraction. Your father wanted to invest in all of them from a returns perspective. Your mother said absolutely not. The portfolio was ethical by design, clean energy, healthcare innovation, educational technology, affordable housing development, sustainable agriculture. She forced him to become an impact investor before impact investing had a name, James said. And it worked. The portfolio performs exceptionally well, precisely because it invests in things that solve problems. They took me to the Connaught. Old money, understated elegance. The suite was absurd. Not a room, a full apartment. I stood at the windows, looking out at Mayfair, trying to reconcile this with the person who'd woken up Saturday morning thinking he had $600. Tuesday morning, I met Alexander Whitmore at his offices. Late 70s, white hair, piercing blue eyes. Decades of experience managing complicated wealth. Finally, he said, shaking my hand firmly. I've been waiting 7 years to meet you. We spent 4 hours going through everything. Properties, investments, board positions, legal structures. Your father was playing three-dimensional chess, one lawyer explained. Every decision created options for future decisions. Alexander gave me another letter from my mother, a second letter. This one explained that Richard had given me something his legitimate children would never have: choice. They inherited obligations, Mom wrote, expectations. The weight of being a Chen in circles where that name mattered. You inherited freedom. No family obligations, no expectations from anyone except yourself. You get to decide completely who you want to be. She ended with advice. Start small. One thing that matters to you, one problem you want to solve. You don't have to change the world tomorrow. Just show up today and try to be decent with what you've been given. That evening, Alexander made a suggestion. Your ex-wife has a reservation at the Ledbury tonight. 8:15, table for 2. I thought you might want to know. Something shifted in me. Not quite revenge, but the need for her to see that I existed outside her narrative. Make me a reservation, I said. 8 o'clock, best table in the house. We arrived at the Ledbury at exactly 8. The restaurant was beautiful. Understated elegance. Center of the room, impossible to miss. At 8:17, Jessica walked in. She was stunning as always. Black dress perfectly cut. Perfect hair. Flawless makeup. Daniel was with her. Tall, handsome in that generic banker way. Expensive suit. Confident smile. They looked like an advertisement for success. Jessica scanned the room. Her eyes landed on me. I watched the recognition hit. The double take. The confusion washing across her face. I was supposed to be in New York, broke, scrambling. Not here at the Ledbury in a suit that cost more than she'd left me with, dining with a distinguished older gentleman who clearly represented serious money. I smiled, raised my wine glass slightly in acknowledgement, then turned back to Alexander as if she barely mattered. She's rattled, Alexander murmured. Her hand just went to Daniel's arm, seeking reassurance. He has no idea who you are. We ate slowly. Course after course of food that deserved attention. The bill came in a leather folder. I pulled out the black card Alexander had given me. Providence Holdings in embossed lettering. We stood to leave. I didn't look at Jessica's table again. Just walked out, letting my presence speak for itself. At 11 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, London area code. Mark? Jessica's voice. Strained, uncertain. Nothing like the confident woman who'd thrown me out 4 days ago. Was that you at dinner tonight? Yes, I said calmly. What are you doing in London? How are you? Who was that man? A business associate. What business? You don't have any... You never asked? I could hear her breathing, mind racing. The divorce papers. You haven't signed them. I've been busy. Busy with what? Mark, what's going on? I'm figuring some things out about who I am, what I want, where I'm going. I could hear Daniel's voice in the background. Heard Jessica move to another room, close a door. This is ridiculous. We're getting divorced. You can't just show up in London and... I had no idea you'd be there, Jessica. How would I? I don't keep track of your schedule anymore. That privilege ended when you threw me out. Sharp intake of breath. I didn't throw you out. I asked you to leave. Felt pretty similar from where I was standing. Send the papers to my lawyer. I'll review them when I'm ready. Until then, enjoy London. Enjoy Daniel. Enjoy your exciting new life. Your lawyer? You have a lawyer now? Everyone should have a lawyer. You taught me that. I hung up before she could respond, and for the first time since Saturday morning, I smiled. Not because I'd hurt her, though I had a little, but because I'd finally stopped letting her define my story. The next morning, Alexander showed me the full report. Jessica's family wealth was stagnant, barely keeping up with spending. Daniel had been supplementing her expenses for 8 months, $8,000 a month in additional support. He'd financed the engagement ring instead of buying it outright. They'd been having an affair for 8 months, planning this whole thing. They were both pretending to have more money than they did, both lying, planning a wedding while my divorce papers sat unsigned. "What do you want to do?" Alexander asked. I thought about Mom's letter, about revenge versus success, about starting small with one thing that matters. "Nothing," I said finally. "Let her wonder. Let her question. Let her marry Daniel thinking she upgraded. The truth will find her eventually. But that's not my concern anymore." "And you? What will you do?" "I'm going to build something," I said. "Something Mom would be proud of. I'll take the board seats, learn, contribute, use this wealth to solve problems instead of just accumulating more. I'll help where it matters, live a life that reflects values instead of just zeros in an account." Alexander smiled. "Your mother knew you'd say that." 3 weeks later, I signed the divorce papers, took nothing but what was mine. Let Jessica have her clean break, her certainty that she'd won. I bought Ryan's building quietly through a shell company, fixed the water pressure, had the elevator repaired, improved every unit. Didn't tell them it was me. Just let their lives get easier without them knowing why. I took the board positions, started learning about industries I'd never considered, started understanding what my father had built and what my mother had protected. I'm still figuring out who I am with all this freedom, still learning to carry the weight of choices that matter, still deciding what kind of person I want to be. But I know one thing. Mom was right. The money isn't the gift. The choice is the freedom to build something meaningful, to help where it matters, to live a life that would make her proud. That's revenge enough. That's success worth having. And somewhere in Manhattan, Jessica married Daniel in the spring, never knowing what she'd thrown away, never understanding that the broke husband she'd discarded had inherited more than she could imagine. I heard through mutual friends that she seems happy. Good for her. I genuinely mean that. Because I'm happy too, in ways that have nothing to do with her anymore. I'm building the life my mother died to give me the freedom to build. I'm becoming the person she believed I could be. And that's worth more than any amount of money in any account anywhere. That's the real inheritance, not the billions. The choice to be decent with what you've been given. That's what Mom wanted from me all along.